The rain hammered against the windshield as Marcus Rothwell guided his black Mercedes through the winding mountain roads of Asheville, North Carolina. After 3 years of circling the globe, Tokyo boardrooms, London negotiations, Dubai investments, he was finally coming home, or rather to one of his homes. The estate on Birchwood Lane had sat empty since his grandmother's death, a sprawling Victorian mansion that held more memories than he cared to revisit. His attorney had been pestering him for months to either sell it or rent it out, but Marcus had ignored every call. Tonight, however, something pulled him there. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the weight of another failed relationship, another woman who loved his bank account more than the man behind it. Or maybe at 34, he was simply tired of running from the past. The iron gates groaned open as he punched in the security code, unchanged after all these years. The driveway stretched ahead, overgrown with weeds that crept between the cobblestones. His headlights swept across the front of the mansion, and Marcus froze. Every window on the ground floor glowed with warm, golden light. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Squatters, thieves. The house was supposed to be empty, secured by the best alarm system money could buy. Yet there it stood, alive and breathing, smoke curling from the chimney into the stormy night. Marcus killed the engine and stepped out into the rain, his expensive Italian shoes sinking into the muddy gravel. He approached the front door, his heart pounding with a mixture of anger and something else, curiosity perhaps, or the strange thrill of the unexpected in a life that had become numbingly predictable. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open slowly, and the scent hit him immediately. Cinnamon, vanilla, and something baking. His grandmother's house had smelled exactly like this during the holidays, back when he was a boy and the world still held wonder. He stepped into the foyer, and his breath caught. The once dusty chandelier sparkled overhead, its crystals catching the light from dozens of candles placed throughout the entrance hall. The marble floors gleamed. Fresh flowers, wildflowers, he realized, probably picked from the overgrown gardens, adorned the antique console table. And from somewhere deep in the house came the sound of laughter, children's laughter. Marcus moved forward, following the sound through the familiar hallways of his childhood. The house had been transformed. Furniture he remembered shrouded in white sheets now stood clean and polished. The portraits of his ancestors had been dusted, their stern faces looking down with what almost seemed like approval. He passed the library, where books he'd read as a boy were arranged neatly on shelves, and the music room where his grandmother's piano sat open, sheet music spread across its stand. The laughter grew louder as he approached the kitchen. Marcus paused at the doorway, and the scene before him rendered him momentarily speechless. A woman stood at the massive stone counter, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, flour dusting her faded jeans and sweater. She couldn't have been older than 30, with delicate features and an expression of pure concentration as she rolled out cookie dough. 2 children sat at the kitchen table, a girl of about 7 with wild curls and a gap-toothed smile, and a boy no older than 5. His face smudged with what appeared to be chocolate. They were decorating cookies, their small hands working carefully, their voices filling the warm space with joy. "Mama, look, I made a star," the little girl exclaimed, holding up her creation. "That's beautiful, Harper," the woman replied, her voice soft and warm. "What about you, Austin? How's your tree coming along?" "It's got 17 sprinkles," the boy announced proudly. Marcus stood frozen, caught between outrage at the invasion of his property and something deeper, something that twisted in his chest as he watched this intimate family scene unfold in his grandmother's kitchen. The woman turned toward the oven, and that's when she saw him. She gasped, stumbling backward, her hand flying to her chest. The rolling pin clattered to the floor. The children's heads snapped up, their eyes widening at the sight of the tall, rain-soaked stranger standing in the doorway. Who are you?" the woman stammered, instinctively moving between Marcus and the children. "How did you get in here?" Marcus found his voice, though it came out harder than he intended. "I could ask you the same question. This is my house. You're trespassing." The color drained from the woman's face. Her hand reached back, finding the edge of the counter for support. "Your house? But that's impossible. Mr. Rothwell died 3 years ago, and his grandson never came back." The estate manager said, "I am the grandson," Marcus interrupted, his jaw tight. "Marcus Rothwell. And I don't recall authorizing anyone to move into my property." The woman's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. The little girl, Harper, slipped from her chair and wrapped her arms around her mother's waist. "Mama, who is he?" "It's okay, sweetheart," the woman whispered, though her voice trembled. She looked back at Marcus, and he saw fear there, yes, but also a fierce, protective determination. "Mr. Rothwell, my name is Violet Brennan. I can explain everything. Please, just give me a chance to explain." Marcus crossed his arms, water dripping from his coat onto the clean floor. "I'm listening." Violet took a shaky breath. "6 months ago, I lost everything. My husband, ex-husband, he left us with nothing but debt. I was working 2 jobs, but it wasn't enough. We were living in our car and winter was coming." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "I was desperate. I drove up here one night, just looking for somewhere safe to park. Somewhere the police wouldn't bother us. I saw the gates were open. Some landscapers had left them that way. The house looked abandoned, and I thought maybe we could stay just for one night, just until I figured something out." "One night turned into 6 months?" Marcus asked, his tone sharp. "I tried to leave," Violet said quickly. "I swear I did, but Harper got sick that first week and we had nowhere else to go. So I made a deal with myself. If we were going to stay, we'd take care of the place. I've been cleaning, maintaining everything, making repairs where I could. I even fixed the leak in the roof over the east wing." She gestured around the kitchen. "I haven't stolen anything. I've only used what was here, and I've been keeping records of everything, utilities, supplies, so I could pay it all back someday." Marcus stared at her, his mind racing. This woman had broken into his house, had been living here for half a year, and yet the place looked better than it had in years. Better than when he'd left it, certainly. The children watched him with wide, fearful eyes, and he saw how thin they were, how their clothes, though clean, were worn and patched. "Where were you planning to go?" he asked finally. Violet's shoulders sagged. "I saved almost enough for a deposit on an apartment. Another month, maybe 2, and we'd have been out of your way. I'm so sorry, Mr. Rothwell. I know this was wrong. I know we're trespassing. But I was just trying to keep my children safe and warm." The little boy, Austin, started to cry quietly. Harper held him close, whispering something Marcus couldn't hear. The sight of them, this small, frightened family huddled together in his grandmother's kitchen, stirred something in him that he thought he'd buried long ago. "What happened to your husband?" he asked, his voice softer now. Violet's jaw tightened. "He left us for his secretary, took all our savings, maxed out credit cards in my name and disappeared. Last I heard, he was in California with his new girlfriend. The divorce papers came with a restraining order against me, claiming I was unstable. He got a smart lawyer. I couldn't fight it." Marcus ran a hand through his wet hair, his mind working through the impossible situation. He should call the police. He should have them removed immediately. That's what any rational person would do. But as he looked at Violet Brennan, at her fierce love for her children, at the care she'd taken with his grandmother's house, at the desperate courage it must have taken to stay here all these months, he found himself asking a different question. "What's your skill set? What did you do before all this?" Violet blinked, clearly confused by the question. "I was a hospitality manager, hotels, event planning. I was good at it too, before everything fell apart." Marcus nodded slowly, an idea forming. A crazy, impulsive, completely unprecedented idea, but something about this moment felt right in a way nothing had felt right in years. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, watching their faces carefully. "You're not leaving tonight. It's late, it's storming, and those children need sleep. Tomorrow we're going to have a longer conversation about your future. Our future, perhaps." Violet's eyes widened. "Our future? I don't understand." Marcus allowed himself a small smile, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. "Neither do I, Mrs. Brennan. Neither do I, but I think we're about to figure it out together." The storm had passed by morning, leaving the world outside washed clean and glistening. Marcus woke in his old bedroom, disoriented for a moment by the familiar wallpaper and the way sunlight filtered through the oak trees outside his window. He'd slept in this room as a child during summer visits, back when his grandmother was alive, and the house rang with warmth and laughter. Now, years later, he found himself back in the same bed, but everything had changed. He dressed quickly and made his way downstairs, following the scent of fresh coffee. The kitchen was already alive with activity. Violet stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with practiced ease, while Harper set the table with careful precision. Austin sat in a high chair, one Marcus vaguely remembered from his own childhood, pulled from some forgotten storage room, eating sliced strawberries with his fingers. "Good morning," Violet said quietly when she noticed him. There were dark circles under her eyes, and Marcus suspected she hadn't slept much. "I made breakfast. I hope that's okay." "It's more than okay," Marcus replied, pulling out a chair. The awkwardness between them was palpable, a strange dance of host and uninvited guest, property owner and trespasser. "We need to talk." Violet nodded, serving pancakes onto plates. "Harper, sweetheart, can you take Austin to the library? There are books there, and I'll call you when breakfast is ready." The little girl nodded solemnly, too wise for her 7 years. She took her brother's hand and led him away, casting one worried glance back at her mother before disappearing down the hallway. Once they were alone, Violet sat across from Marcus, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, as if drawing strength from its warmth. "I've been thinking all night about what to say to you, about how to make this right." "Tell me the whole story," Marcus said. "Everything. How did you end up here, really?" Violet took a deep breath, and the story that emerged was one of gradual collapse and quiet desperation. She'd met her husband, Derek Brennan, when she was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in hospitality management. He'd been charming, successful, a rising star in commercial real estate. They'd married quickly, had Harper a year later, and Austin 3 years after that. For a while life had been good, not extravagant but comfortable and full of promise. Then Derek's business partner had embezzled funds, the company collapsed, and everything unraveled. Derek changed, became distant and angry. He blamed Violet for everything, for not making enough money, for the children being a burden, for his own failures. When he finally left, he did it with calculated cruelty, ensuring she'd have nothing. "I fought for custody," Violet said, her voice barely above a whisper, "but his lawyer painted me as an unfit mother, said I was unemployed, unstable, living out of a car. They made it sound like I chose that life instead of it being forced on me. I got temporary custody, but there's a hearing in 2 months. If I don't have stable housing and income by then—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus understood. She could lose her children. "What about family? Friends?" he asked. "My parents died in a car accident when I was 19, Violet said. "I have a brother in Seattle, but we haven't spoken in years. And friends. When you fall from grace this hard, people disappear. They don't want to catch what you have, I guess." Marcus studied her face, seeing the strength beneath the exhaustion. This wasn't a woman looking for a handout or playing victim. This was someone who'd been knocked down by life and was fighting with everything she had to get back up. "Here's what I'm proposing," he said slowly, an idea that had been forming since last night, now taking solid shape. "This house has been empty for 3 years. It's too big for one person, and honestly, I've been avoiding it because of memories. But seeing it last night, the way you've brought it back to life, it made me realize something. This place was meant to be a home, not a museum." Violet's eyes widened, but she remained silent, waiting. "I need a property manager," Marcus continued. "Someone to oversee the maintenance, manage the grounds, coordinate repairs. Someone who understands hospitality and can eventually help me convert the East Wing into a bed and breakfast, something my grandmother always wanted to do but never got around to. The position comes with housing, full benefits, and a salary that should satisfy any family court." "You're offering me a job?" Violet asked, disbelief coloring her voice. "I'm offering you a chance," Marcus corrected, "but I need to be clear. This isn't charity. I have high standards, and this property requires real work. Can you handle that?" For the first time since he'd met her, Violet smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed her entire face. "Mr. Rothwell, I've been managing this house for 6 months, while working night shifts at a diner 15 miles away and taking care of 2 children. I can handle anything you throw at me. Call me Marcus," he said, extending his hand across the table, "and we have a deal." Her handshake was firm, her eyes bright with unshed tears of relief. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to us." Over the next few days, Marcus discovered that Violet hadn't exaggerated her capabilities. She had detailed records of everything she'd done to the house, every repair, every improvement, every penny spent on utilities. She'd even created a comprehensive inventory of the property's contents, noting items that needed restoration or replacement. But it was watching her with Harper and Austin that truly impressed him. Despite everything they'd been through, the children were polite, well-mannered, and remarkably resilient. Harper helped her mother without complaint, and Austin, though shy, had an infectious laugh that rang through the halls. Violet had somehow protected them from the worst of their circumstances, maintaining their childhood, even as the world crumbled around them. Marcus found himself spending more time at the Asheville estate than he'd planned. He'd intended to return to New York after a few days, to get back to the dozen business ventures demanding his attention. Instead, he worked remotely from his grandmother's old study, taking calls with Tokyo while Harper did her homework at the library table, video conferencing with London, while Austin played quietly with wooden blocks on the floor. It was during one of these afternoons that Marcus made a discovery that would change everything. He'd been searching for some old property documents in the attic when he found a box of his grandmother's personal papers. Inside was a letter, yellowed with age, addressed to him in her elegant handwriting. It was dated just a week before her death. "My dearest Marcus," it read, "if you're reading this, I'm gone and you finally come home. I always knew you would, eventually. The heart has a way of calling us back to the places where we first learned to love. This house holds so much love, my dear boy. Your grandfather's love for me, my love for you, your parents' love before they left us too soon. Don't let it stand empty. Don't let fear of loss keep you from building something beautiful here. The greatest tragedy isn't loving and losing, it's never loving at all. Fill these rooms with laughter again. Fill them with life. That's all I ever wanted for you. All my love, Gran." Marcus sat in the dusty attic, the letter trembling in his hands, as emotions he'd kept locked away for years threatened to overwhelm him. His grandmother had known. She'd understood why he'd run, why he'd built an empire of investments and acquisitions, but never built a home. After his parents' death when he was 10, after his grandmother's passing 3 years ago, he'd convinced himself that keeping his distance from people, from places, from anything permanent, was the smart choice. Love meant loss, and he'd had enough loss for one lifetime. But now, listening to Harper's laughter drift up from downstairs, hearing Violet sing softly as she worked in the garden, feeling the house breathe with life again, he wondered if his grandmother had been right all along. That evening, as they sat down to dinner together, a routine that had somehow become natural over the past week, Marcus made an announcement. "I've decided to stay," he said. "Not just for a few days. I'm making this my primary residence. New York can wait." Violet looked up from her plate, surprise written across her features. "Are you sure? I mean, we're managing fine here. You don't have to—" "I want to," Marcus interrupted. "This is my home. It's time I started treating it like one." Harper beamed at him. "Does that mean you'll be here for my birthday next month?" "When is it?" Marcus asked. "December 23rd, Violet said quietly. "She'll be 8. "Then I'll be here," Marcus promised, and the smile Harper gave him felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. But that night, as Marcus reviewed some contracts in the study, his phone rang. The caller ID showed his head of security in New York. "Mr. Rothwell, we have a situation," the man said without preamble. "Someone's been asking questions about the Asheville property, making inquiries about who's living there, digging into records. We traced it back to a private investigator hired by a Derek Brennan." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "When did this start?" 3 days ago, right after you registered Violet Brennan as an employee in the system. The investigator's been thorough, talking to neighbors, checking utilities, building a case file." After hanging up, Marcus sat in the darkness of the study, his mind racing. Derek Brennan was coming for his children, and now that Violet had a job and stable housing, the very things that should protect her, he was likely building a different argument. That she'd used Marcus, that she'd manipulated a wealthy man, that she was still unfit. Marcus had 2 months to figure out how to protect this family that had somehow, impossibly, become important to him. 2 months before the custody hearing that could tear apart the fragile happiness they'd built, and he had absolutely no idea how he was going to do it. The next morning, Marcus called Violet into the study. She entered hesitantly, wiping her hands on a dish tag, concern etched across her features. Over the past 2 weeks, they'd fallen into an easy rhythm, but the formality of this summons clearly worried her. "Please sit," Marcus said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. "We need to discuss something important." Violet sat, her posture rigid. "If this is about the water bill, I can explain. Austin left the garden hose running, but I've already talked to him about—" "It's not about the water bill," Marcus interrupted gently. "It's about your ex-husband." The color drained from Violet's face. "What about him?" Marcus explained about the private investigator, about Derek's inquiries into the property and Violet's employment. As he spoke, he watched her hands clench into fists in her lap, her knuckles turning white. "He's building a case," she whispered when Marcus finished. "He's going to use this against me, isn't he? He's going to say I seduced you or manipulated you into giving me a job." "That's likely his angle," Marcus admitted. "But we're not going to let him win. I've already contacted the best family law attorney in North Carolina. Her name is Patricia Donnelly, and she's handled cases far more complicated than this." Violet shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't afford a lawyer like that. I can barely afford the public defender I have now." "You're not paying for it," Marcus said firmly. "Consider it part of your employment package." "No." Violet stood abruptly, her voice sharp. "No, I can't let you do that. Don't you see? That's exactly what Derek wants. He'll use it as proof that I'm using you, that I'm not standing on my own 2 feet. The judge will think I'm some kind of gold digger who wormed her way into a billionaire's house. Then we'll find another way," Marcus said calmly, though his mind was already racing through possibilities. "Sit down, Violet, please." She sank back into the chair, her hands covering her face. "I should never have stayed here. I should have left that first night. Now I've dragged you into my mess, and Derek's going to twist everything until—" "Stop," Marcus said, his voice firmer now. "You're not dragging me anywhere. I made my own choices, and I don't regret them. We're going to figure this out together." Over the following weeks, the situation grew more complicated. Derek's investigator became bolder, showing up at local businesses in town, asking questions about Marcus and Violet, trying to find anyone who'd say they'd seen them together in compromising situations. The small community of Asheville buzzed with gossip, the billionaire and the homeless woman living together in the old Rothwell mansion. Marcus tried to maintain distance, to keep their relationship strictly professional, but it was nearly impossible. Harper had started calling him Mr. Marcus, and would seek him out to show him her drawings or tell him about her day at school. Austin had overcome his initial shyness and now followed Marcus around the property like a small shadow, chattering endlessly about dinosaurs and superheroes. And Violet had become something Marcus couldn't quite define. She was his employee, yes, but also his friend, someone he looked forward to seeing every morning over coffee, someone whose opinion he valued, whose laughter could brighten even his worst days. He found himself noticing small things, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the fierce protectiveness in her eyes when she looked at her children, the quiet strength that kept her moving forward even when the world seemed determined to knock her down. It was dangerous, these feelings that were developing. Dangerous for both of them, especially with the custody hearing looming. 3 weeks before the hearing, Patricia Donnelly arrived at the mansion for a strategy meeting. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Let me be frank," she said after reviewing the case files. "Derek Brennan has built a compelling narrative. Unemployed mother living in her car with 2 young children breaks into a wealthy man's property and miraculously ends up employed by him with full housing benefits. A skeptical judge could see this as opportunism at best, manipulation at worst." "But that's not what happened," Violet protested. "I know that," Patricia said, "and we need to prove it. We need character witnesses, documentation of your work history, proof that you've been an excellent mother despite impossible circumstances. We also need to address the elephant in the room." She looked between Marcus and Violet. "Are you two involved romantically?" "No," they said simultaneously, but Marcus felt heat rise to his face. Patricia's eyebrow arched. "Are you sure? Because if there's even a hint of a relationship, Derek's lawyer will use it to paint you as unstable and morally compromised." "We're not involved," Violet said firmly. "Mr. Rothwell has been nothing but professional and generous. He gave me a job when I needed one, that's all." "Good," Patricia said. "Keep it that way, at least until after the hearing." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He wandered downstairs and found Violet sitting in the library, surrounded by photo albums and papers. She looked up when he entered, quickly wiping her eyes. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. Marcus sat down beside her. "What are you looking at?" "Evidence," Violet said with a bitter laugh. Pictures of happier times. Birthday parties, family vacations, Harper's first day of school. Proof that I was once a good mother before everything fell apart. You're still a good mother, Marcus said quietly. Maybe the best I've ever seen. Violet met his eyes, and something passed between them, something electric and dangerous and utterly undeniable. For a moment, Marcus thought she might lean closer, thought he might close the distance between them, but then Violet stood abruptly, gathering her papers. I should get to bed, she said. Big day tomorrow, we're meeting with the school principal to get Harper's records. Marcus watched her go, his heart pounding. Patricia's warning echoed in his mind, but it was too late. He was already in too deep. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One morning, Marcus received a call from his business manager in New York. You remember that commercial property deal Derek Brennan was involved in? The one that went south 5 years ago? Vaguely, Marcus said. What about it? I did some digging. Brennan wasn't a victim of embezzlement. He was part of it. He and his partner deliberately tanked the company, moved assets offshore and left investors holding the bag. I found paper trails, shell companies, the whole 9 yards. He's been living off that money ever since. Marcus's pulse quickened. Can you prove it? With the right forensic accountant, absolutely. And there's more. He's been hiding assets from the divorce settlement. The guy's been claiming poverty while sitting on over $2 million in offshore accounts. Marcus smiled grimly. Send me everything you have. When he told Violet about the discovery, her reaction surprised him. Instead of joy or relief, she looked troubled. If we use this, he'll go to prison, she said slowly. And as much as I hate Derek for what he did to us, he's still Harper and Austin's father. I don't want them growing up knowing their mother put their father in jail. Marcus stared at her, amazed by her capacity for grace, even towards someone who'd hurt her so deeply. What do you want to do? Violet thought for a long moment. We use it as leverage. We tell him that if he drops the custody challenge and signs over full parental rights, we won't report the fraud. He gets to walk away free, and my children get to keep their stability. That's incredibly generous, Marcus said. It's strategic, Violet corrected. I don't want to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for Derek to come back and try again. If he signs over his rights, it's done. Final, we can all move forward. Patricia Donnelly arranged a meeting with Derek and his attorney at a neutral location in downtown Asheville. Marcus insisted on accompanying Violet, despite Patricia's concerns about optics. Derek Brennan was exactly what Marcus expected. Slick, handsome in a manufactured way, with cold eyes that assessed everything in terms of personal gain. He barely glanced at Violet, his attention focused entirely on Marcus. So you're the billionaire playing house with my wife, Derek said with a smirk. Ex-wife, Marcus corrected coldly. And I'm the billionaire who discovered your fraud scheme. The smirk vanished. Patricia laid out the evidence document by document, watching Derek's face grow progressively paler. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear. Here's the deal, Patricia said. You sign over full parental rights to Violet. You drop all custody claims. You disappear from their lives completely. In exchange, we don't report the fraud to federal authorities. And if I don't? Derek asked, but his voice had lost its confidence. Then you go to prison for 10 to 15 years, Patricia said matter-of-factly. Wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, take your pick. Derek looked at Violet for the first time. You'd really do this? Keep my own children from me? You left us homeless, Violet said, her voice steady. You tried to have me declared unfit. You haven't asked about Harper or Austin once since you walked into this room. Don't pretend this is about them. This is about winning, about control. Well, you lose. Sign the papers. The silence stretched out, tense and heavy. Then Derek reached for a pen. 20 minutes later, it was done. Derek Brennan signed away his parental rights, and in doing so, signed himself out of their lives forever. As he left the conference room, he paused at the door. She'll do the same to you, you know, he said to Marcus. Once she's bled you dry. Marcus stood, his full height and presence filling the space. The only person who ever tried to bleed anyone dry in this story is you, and you failed. Now get out. When Derek was gone, Violet collapsed into a chair, her body shaking with silent sobs. Marcus knelt beside her, and this time, he didn't hesitate. He pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried, tears of relief, of grief for what her marriage had been, of joy for what her future could now become. It's over, he whispered into her hair. It's really over." But even as he said it, Marcus knew something else was just beginning. The weeks following Derek's surrender felt like stepping into sunshine after years of storm. Violet moved through the mansion with a lightness Marcus had never seen before. Her laughter more frequent, her smiles reaching her eyes. Harper threw herself into school with renewed enthusiasm, no longer carrying the weight of uncertainty about her future. And Austin, who'd been having nightmares about being taken away, finally slept through the night. But as the holidays approached, Marcus found himself grappling with feelings he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. He'd told himself that helping Violet was simply good business, that providing stability for her family was the right thing to do. But somewhere between Harper's bedtime stories and Austin's dinosaur facts, between morning coffee conversations with Violet and quiet evenings by the fire, he'd fallen completely and irrevocably in love. The realization terrified him. He threw himself into work, taking calls at odd hours, burying himself in contracts and acquisitions. If Violet noticed his distance, she didn't mention it. She continued her duties, managing the property with quiet efficiency, transforming the East Wing into guest quarters that would soon welcome their first bed and breakfast visitors. It was Harper who finally broke through his defenses. 2 days before her 8th birthday, she knocked on the study door. Marcus looked up from his laptop to find her standing there in her pajamas, clutching a piece of paper. "Can I come in?" she asked shyly. "Of course," Marcus said, closing his computer. "What's that you have?" Harper approached slowly and handed him the paper. It was a drawing, a child's rendering of the mansion with 4 stick figures standing in front. One tall figure clearly represented him. The other 3 were Violet, Harper, and Austin. Above them she'd written in careful letters, "Our family." "Is this okay?" Harper asked anxiously. "I know you're not my real dad, but you feel like family. Is it okay if I think of you that way?" Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. He pulled Harper into a hug, his voice rough with emotion. "It's more than okay, sweetheart. It's perfect." That night, Marcus made a decision. He found Violet in the kitchen, preparing ingredients for Harper's birthday cake. "We need to talk," he said. Violet set down the measuring cup, worry flickering across her face. "That sounds serious." "It is." Marcus took a breath, steadying himself. "I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Violet's eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. "I know the timing is terrible," Marcus continued quickly. "I know we agreed to keep things professional, but I can't pretend anymore. I love you, Violet. I love your strength, your grace, the way you fight for your children. I love how you've brought this house back to life. I love morning coffee with you and hearing about your day. I love—" "Stop," Violet whispered, and Marcus's heart sank. But then she smiled, tears streaming down her face. "Stop talking and let me say it back. I love you too, Marcus. I've been in love with you for weeks, maybe months. I kept telling myself it was gratitude, that I was just confused, but it's not. It's love. Real, terrifying, wonderful love." Marcus crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, like something precious and fragile. Then Violet's hands found his hair, and the kiss deepened, months of suppressed longing pouring out in that single moment. "Mom!" Harper's voice from the doorway made them spring apart. The little girl stood there in her pajamas, Austin beside her, both children staring with wide eyes. "Oh, sweetheart." "I can explain," Violet started, but Harper's face broke into the biggest smile Marcus had ever seen. "Are you kissing Mr. Marcus?" she asked. "Yes," Violet admitted, blushing. Is that okay with you?" Harper ran forward and threw her arms around both of them. "It's the best. Does this mean he's going to be our real dad now?" Austin joined the group hug, not fully understanding but caught up in his sister's excitement. Marcus looked down at the 3 people who'd somehow become his entire world and felt the last of his carefully constructed walls crumble. "If your mom will have me," he said softly. Violet laughed through her tears. "Are you proposing, Marcus Rothwell?" "Not yet," Marcus said with a grin. "When I propose, it's going to be perfect. But I am saying that I want this, all of this. The chaos and the noise and the bedtime stories. I want to be part of this family if you'll let me." "Yes," Violet whispered. 1,000 times yes. Harper's birthday party 2 days later was everything a child could dream of. The mansion filled with her classmates and their parents, with decorations and laughter and joy. Marcus watched Violet work the room with natural grace, saw how the other parents gravitated toward her warmth and kindness. She'd already begun building a life here, creating connections in the community that would serve them well when the bed and breakfast opened. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Marcus gathered everyone in the library. He'd been planning this moment carefully. "I have presents," he announced. "Harper first, since it's your birthday." He handed her a large envelope. Inside was a document, adoption papers, already filed with the court, awaiting only final signatures. "What is it?" Harper asked, struggling with the legal language. "It means," Marcus said gently, kneeling to her level, "that if your mom says yes, and if you want me to, I'd like to officially become your father. Not just in our hearts, but on paper too." Harper threw her arms around his neck so hard she nearly knocked him over. "Yes, yes, yes, yes!" Austin, not wanting to be left out, demanded his present. Marcus handed him a smaller envelope containing a certificate declaring Austin Brennan Rothwell the official chief dinosaur expert of the estate, complete with a promise to build a dinosaur-themed playground in the gardens. Finally, Marcus turned to Violet. From his pocket, he pulled a small velvet box. "I know I said I wasn't proposing yet," he said, opening the box to reveal his grandmother's engagement ring, a simple but elegant diamond set in platinum. "But I realized something. Perfect isn't about the right moment or the right words. Perfect is right now with our children here, in this house that brought us together. Violet Brennan, will you marry me?" Violet's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Your grandmother's ring," she whispered. "She would have loved you," Marcus said. "She would have loved all of you. She always said this house needed to be filled with laughter and life. You gave me that. You gave me everything." "Yes," Violet said, laughing and crying simultaneously. "Yes, I'll marry you." The ring slid onto her finger as if it had been made for her. Harper and Austin cheered, dancing around them in excitement. 6 months later, on a perfect June day, Marcus and Violet were married in the gardens of the estate. It was a small ceremony, just close friends, a few business associates, and Patricia Donnelly, who'd become a dear friend through the legal battles. Harper served as flower girl, taking her duties seriously, while Austin proudly carried the rings on a small velvet pillow. As Marcus said his vows, he looked past Violet to the mansion standing proud and beautiful in the background. His grandmother had been right. The greatest tragedy wasn't loving and losing. It was never loving at all. He'd spent years running from connection, from vulnerability, from the possibility of loss. And in doing so, he'd nearly missed out on the greatest gift life could offer. The bed and breakfast opened that fall to rave reviews. Violet's hospitality expertise, combined with the mansion's historic charm, created something special, a place where people came not just to stay, but to experience warmth and welcome. Harper and Austin thrived, their adoption finalized without complication. Derek had disappeared, true to his word, leaving them free to build their future without shadows from the past. One evening, as the first snow of winter began to fall, Marcus found Violet standing in the foyer where he'd first seen her nearly a year ago. She was decorating the chandelier with evergreen boughs, the same scent of cinnamon and vanilla filling the air. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "About that first night," Violet said softly. "When you found us here, I was so terrified. I thought you were going to call the police, that we'd end up in a shelter or worse. I never imagined that the billionaire would fall in love with you." Marcus finished with a smile. Violet turned in his arms, her eyes bright. "That I'd find home, real home, not just a place to stay, but a place to belong." From upstairs came the sound of Harper practicing piano, his grandmother's piano, now played daily by eager young fingers. Austin's laughter echoed from the library where he was building a fort out of cushions. "Do you ever regret it?" Violet asked. "Letting us stay, changing your entire life?" Marcus kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "The only thing I regret is all the years I spent afraid to live this way. Afraid to let people in. You didn't just give me a family, Violet. You gave me a life worth living." Later that night, after the children were tucked in bed, Marcus stood in his study looking at Harper's drawing, now framed and hanging on the wall. 4 stick figures in front of a house. "Our family," written in a child's careful hand. He thought about the night he'd driven up that rainy driveway, exhausted and lost, returning to a house he'd been avoiding for years. He'd expected to find an empty building full of ghosts. Instead, he'd found light in the windows, laughter in the halls, and three people who would become his reason for everything. Some might call it fate, others might call it coincidence. Marcus called it grace, the kind of unexpected mercy that shows up when you least expect it and most need it. Disguised as trespassers in your grandmother's kitchen, he turned off the study light and climbed the stairs to the bedroom he now shared with his wife. Through the window, he could see the grounds of the estate stretching out under a blanket of fresh snow. In the spring, they'd plant gardens. In the summer, they'd host weddings in the gazebo Violet wanted to restore. In the fall, they'd welcome guests from around the world. But tonight, right now, he simply climbed into bed beside the woman he loved and listened to the old house settle around them, no longer empty, no longer silent, but full of the sounds of home. And somewhere, Marcus liked to imagine, his grandmother was smiling.